Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Matilda and I make videos about books, reading, writing and other things that tickle my fancy. Today I'm back with another quarterly reading wrap-up. These are all the books I've read between April and June of 2019 and there are 15 of them, so we should probably get started. Now I've had a very good quarter reading wise. I have read quite a bit and a huge part of that is thanks to the Owl's Magical Readathon that was back in April and was hosted by G over at Book Roast. That readathon is really the first readathon I've ever participated in and it did force me to read quite a bit. I had some struggles. There are some videos from that I'll link up in the cards and down in the description, but basically it ran at the same time as Captain Raimo and also right after I had had surgery on my foot, so I was struggling to get all the reading done. In the end, I do believe I read 9 things for the Owl's Magical Readathon, but only 5 of those are Goodreads books, and those are the ones I'm going to talk about. If you want to know about the comics I read back then, I will again have linked that somewhere around myself. But yeah, I am going to start with the 5 books I read during the Owl's Magical Readathon back in April. Now I'm going to put a picture of the book I'm talking about up on the screen here, and I'm not going to give synopses to really any of the books, because I don't want to spoil you, first of all, because I don't really know where to not say any more about a book. I tend to sometimes say a bit too much. And second of all, because I'm going to talk about 15 books, it's going to be a really long video regardless, and I'd prefer to keep it on the slightly shorter side by not putting synopses in, just so we have that cleared up. So first up, I read Dear Evan Hansen by Val Emmich. This is the novelization of the musical by the same name. I have listened to the musical a few times, but I wouldn't say I know the entire plot of the story or of the musical. And reading the book was a very interesting experience because I could see similarities and parallels between the songs and the novel, and I really enjoyed that. I, again, have not seen the musical. I've only listened to the score or the album for it, so I can't really say how truthful it is between the musical and the book, but I did enjoy it and I enjoyed it enough to give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Holes by Louis Sachar. I still haven't learned how to pronounce that name. I am still sorry about it. Now this is a book I read back in 2012 for an English class that I was taking at a then local university, and that was the first time I came across the story and the book. I've never seen the film, and I really enjoyed the book when I read it back in 2012. I think it was the best book I read during that course, and I think we read 4 or 5 of them. However, I think a part of why I had given it such a good rating back then, I'd given it 5 stars back then, was because that was a book I actually enjoyed compared to most of the other literature we read that I was not a huge fan of. I'm not going to mention any names, but I didn't enjoy them as much. Now, upon rereading Holes, I did still enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it to the extent I did before, and I ended up lowering my rating on Goodreads from 5 stars to 4 stars. Next up we have Replica by Lauren Oliver, and if you saw my, was it my wrap-up or my vlog? One of the two. I had some issues with this book. I had some issues in that all guys were just attractive, like super attractive, and there were a few things that didn't make sense, and there were also there were a couple of grammatical errors that stood out and pulled me out of the story. And it's a real shame that those went through the editing process and no one spotted them and took them out. But there were a few times where I was like, what am I reading? What? In the end, I gave the book 4 out of 5 stars. I'm closer to a 3.5. I found it enjoyable. I found the story interesting and I liked the varying point of view. However, I think I'm giving it a higher rating than I maybe should being a very loose term here, because I read Gemma's story first and then Lyra's story. There are 3 ways to read it. Gemma first and then Lyra, Lyra first and then Gemma, or alternating whose chapter you read. I guess then there's 4 versions, because then you can either start with Lyra and then Gemma, Lyra, Gemma, or start Gemma, Lyra. Whatever. I read Gemma's entire story first and then Lyra's, and I did enjoy Lyra's better. I didn't find her as annoying as I found Gemma. All in all, I did end up putting a 4 out of 5 star rating on Goodreads, but it might be closer to a 3.5 star rating. After Replica, I read Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is a book I've had on my shelf since 2011, 2012 or something like that, and I just haven't read. But every time I've gotten rid of books, I've kept that one because something pulls me towards it, and I finally read it, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the pacing, I loved the plot, I really like how it played out, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The 5th and final book I read during the Owl's Magical Readathon was Scythe by Neil Schusterman. I've actually learned how to pronounce that book's name now. It's Scythe, not Shite, or whatever I said in my else TBR video. This was again another book I really enjoyed. It hadn't been on my shelf for as long as Cinder, but I think I picked it up early last year and it was so amazing. I have heard people raving about it, and that is one of the reasons I picked it up in the first place and bought it, but it was just such a good book. I so loved it, and I still think about it to this day, which is pretty good praise if I do say so myself. I really, really enjoyed that book. I thought it was brilliant, and there were so many things in it that really made you think, and it's things I still think about. After The Owls was over, I decided to start rereading a series that I read in my early teen years, I want to say, starting when I was probably preteen, around 12, and then until 15, 16 maybe. And that is the Georgia Nicolson series, or The Confessions of Georgia Nicolson by Louise Renison. This is a series that me and my friend Alex bonded over. They introduced me to it when I was probably 12, and it was something we bonded over and we had a lot of fun with that story. So far I've reread the first 5. That is Angus, Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, On the Bright Side, I'm Now the Girlfriend of a Sex God, Knocked Out by My Nunga Nungas, Dancing in My Nutty Pants, and Away Laughing on a Fast Camel. I think I got that right. These are all by Louise Renison. They are the first 5 in a 10-book series, and I gotta say that they haven't really aged as well as I would have liked for them to, or my tastes and thoughts and morals and whatever have just changed a lot in the past decade, which isn't that weird, but yeah. I remember these books being really, really funny, and I remember being able to relate a bit to Georgia. I cannot relate to Georgia anymore. I find her kind of annoying. I am sad to say that I now think that she's not as nice of a person, really. There's a bit of fat shaming. There's a lot of focus on how people look, and Georgia, at least in her mind and to her friends, do put people down a lot about how they look, or like physical qualities that they can't really control. I'm not for girl on girl hate. I'm not really for hate in any regard, but I was disappointed to reread these books because I remember them being great and me loving them, and it's kind of sad that I feel this way about them now. I have given them all a 4-star rating on Goodreads. The 5 I've read so far all have a 4-star rating. Maybe that's not really fair because I'm not actually sure if they're worthy of a 4-star rating right now, which I feel like I'm being really rude towards them, and I feel like I'm tarnishing their legacy or something. But I didn't enjoy them that much this time around, and that's sad. I'm also very much not the target demographic. I will admit that, but I gave them a 4 out of 5-star rating, mostly because of nostalgia. I also read Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel by Alice Oseman, surprisingly enough, and it is so good. It was so good. I don't read a lot of graphic novels, I say having just read another one, but I don't read that many of them, and this was so good. It was a very good introduction, I feel like, to graphic novels, and I enjoyed it a lot. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars, and it was just really, really good. Next up we have The Treatment by C.L. Taylor. Now this is a book I did not buy myself. Marcus and I did a thing where we went to a couple of different bookstores and picked out books that we thought that the other person might enjoy. We were going to make a video out of it, but that kind of went out the window. This is a book I didn't buy myself. It is also a book in a genre that I would not necessarily read because it is a thriller. It's a YA thriller, so I mean the YA part is correct, but yeah, I wouldn't have picked it up myself had I seen it. I don't think that's the reason why I didn't actually like it. I think the reason for not liking it is justified, and I didn't like it because of the plot, partially, because some things just did not make sense. And it was just thing after thing after thing of the main character either doing stupid things happening that couldn't really be explained, and not in a way of like, oh, the door just slammed shut. Was it the wind or was it a ghost? Or something else like that. It was just things that weren't explained at all. And the book also ended on a cliffhanger that I just found weird, especially since the book is a standalone. So I did not enjoy this book. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. The writing itself, like the writing style, the word choices, the way the sentences flowed, was good. But the characters and the plot just didn't do it for me. Next up, I read a book called Heartstopper, which is a Swedish book, and it's an anthology with sort of erotic or sexual stories about queer characters by queer authors, or at least authors who write queer characters. This is a book I've really looked forward to for a long time. I don't remember when it came out now, maybe last year, and it has one of my favorite Swedish authors in it. I think I've talked about her before. Her name is Anna Ahlund. I really enjoy the first 2 novels that she's released, and I'm impatiently awaiting the 3rd one that was just pushed back and won't be released until next year. But it's an anthology of short stories. I think there are 11 of them. So 11 authors have written one each, and I had such high hopes for it. I really looked forward to it, and I was so happy when I found it in a store, but it did not live up to the expectations. Now, it's difficult for me to give an anthology a single grade because there are 11 authors contributing to it, and different stories were different levels of good for me. But I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars in total because it was sort of like a middle ground for them all. But I was really disappointed, and I'm really sad about it. Next up, we have Circe. I'm still good at this. This is a book that my book circle was reading, and we met up to talk about it at the end of May, I believe. Now, I've heard a lot of hype about it. I think the other 3 participants in that meeting of my book circle really enjoyed it. I did not finish it. I think it was just a bit too dense for me. I don't know a whole lot about mythology, and it was quite information heavy. And I both tried reading it, physically and listening to it as an audiobook, and I couldn't get into it. I am really sad about it because the writing itself was, again, very, very good, but it was just too much information and too many names, and I couldn't really get into it. I think I read about 1/3 of it before I stopped, and I wish I would have finished it. I wish I would have been more invested in it, and I think the fault is more with me than the book itself. But maybe I was just not in the right headspace for it. Maybe I'll try again later, but I DNF'd it, and therefore I have not given it a rating. And the last book I read in the 2nd quarter of 2019 was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This is another book I've heard a lot of hype about, and I pre-ordered it, and then it couldn't be delivered until next year, which is a little too long to wait. Luckily, my parents were on vacation and they could find it and buy me a copy. And I read this over the course of like a couple days, which isn't that impressive, but it was a book that I found myself not wanting to put down, and I found myself thinking about it when I wasn't reading it and just wanting to get back into it again. And it was so enjoyable. It was so cute. It was really funny. There were a couple moments that were like, okay, now there is drama that isn't really necessary, but I so enjoyed that book, and I read it at the right time, I think. I think I needed that kind of book when I read it. Unsurprisingly, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I do want to look into more Christina Lauren's things later on, but that is the first book I read, and I think it set the bar quite high for future books I read of theirs, but I really, really enjoyed it. So that was it for this video. These are the 15 books I read in the 2nd quarter of 2019, and I've now surpassed my initial Goodreads goal. My original goal was 24 books. I have now read 25, I believe, so I have surpassed that. And instead of going crazy and raising my goal to something that would probably end up being unreachable, like I normally would, I have only raised it to 30. So I have 5-6 books left to read. And if I hit that goal with plenty of time to spare, I'll probably race it again. Now, if you're interested to find out about some of my upcoming reads, I will have a video up next weekend that features my Newts TBR, because yes, we had the Owls back in April, and now we're taking the Newts in August. If that is something that sounds interesting to you, I will have linked to G's video down below, so you can go watch that. But I will have my TBR video up next weekend, so stay tuned for that if you want to see that, and I have some other videos coming out between now and then as well. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos from me, don't forget to subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!